Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you something that might hurt a little, but if you take this message to heart, it will set you free. Narcissism is a psychological condition that can be both difficult to recognize and incredibly damaging when left unchecked. It's a term that gets tossed around a lot, but understanding its true nature is crucial if we're going to avoid being manipulated by those who exhibit narcissistic traits. Narcissism at its core is a deep-seated sense of entitlement and self-importance. People with narcissistic tendencies have an inflated sense of their own worth and believe they deserve special treatment. They have a constant need for admiration, often at the expense of others, and they lack genuine empathy. It's important to note that narcissism exists on a spectrum. Not everyone who shows narcissistic behaviors is a full-blown narcissist, but even people who exhibit mild narcissistic traits can cause significant harm in relationships, whether personal, professional, or social. The true narcissist, however, exhibits a chronic pattern of behavior that undermines others to build up their own ego. They are incredibly skilled at using others for their own benefit, often without any real concern for how their actions affect those around them. In relationships with narcissists, the dynamic often becomes one-sided. The narcissist demands constant validation, praise, and attention, but they rarely offer the same in return. This imbalance creates an unhealthy emotional dependency where you feel compelled to cater to their needs while your own emotional well-being takes a back seat. They feed off your energy, and the more you give, the more they demand. It becomes an insidious cycle. Each time you fulfill their needs, they require more, and it's never enough. It's as if they are bottomless pits of validation, constantly seeking affirmation and praise to boost their fragile sense of self-worth. A narcissist's inability to genuinely connect with others and their focus on their own needs can make them manipulative and controlling. They may use gaslighting tactics to distort reality and make you question your own perceptions. For example, they might downplay their harmful behavior or twist situations to make you feel as though you are overreacting. This tactic erodes your confidence and leaves you doubting your own judgment, making you more susceptible to their manipulation. What's even more dangerous is how narcissists are able to convince others of their charm, often leading people to overlook or excuse their behavior. They can be charismatic and persuasive, which is why it can be so difficult to break free from their influence. At first, you may feel like you're dealing with someone who's just confident or assertive, but over time you start to see the cracks in their facade. They may have a tendency to belittle others to elevate themselves, undermine your achievements, or constantly seek praise for things that others might consider ordinary. The narcissist's constant need for admiration often blinds them to the needs and feelings of others. Empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person, is typically absent or severely underdeveloped in narcissistic individuals. This lack of empathy makes it nearly impossible for them to engage in healthy, reciprocal relationships. They may dismiss your feelings, fail to support you during difficult times, or take advantage of your kindness without offering anything of substance in return. This absence of empathy also plays a significant role in how narcissists handle conflicts. They rarely apologize or take responsibility for their actions. When they do something wrong, it's never their fault. In fact, they may try to shift the blame onto others, manipulate the situation to avoid accountability, or even act as though they are the victim. This behavior can be especially harmful in relationships where trust and mutual understanding are essential. Over time, you may find yourself walking on eggshells, constantly trying to avoid conflict or pleasing them to maintain some semblance of peace. If you're constantly seeking to meet the needs of a narcissist, you may start to lose sight of your own needs. You give and give, but they never give back. The emotional toll is profound. Your self-esteem may begin to erode as you become entangled in their demands. You may start to feel invisible, as if your worth only exists in how much you can do for them. This emotional depletion is one of the most significant consequences of being involved with a narcissist. You become so focused on fulfilling their needs and maintaining their happiness that you neglect your own mental and emotional health. In many cases, this can lead to burnout, depression, and a loss of personal identity. The danger in constantly feeding a narcissist's need for validation is that it reinforces their behavior. They learn that their demands will be met as long as they continue to manipulate and control others. They grow more entitled, more demanding, and more destructive. If you're constantly giving them what they crave, you're not helping them grow or improve. You're merely enabling them to continue down a path of self-centeredness and disregard for others. This behavior becomes entrenched, and without intervention or a change in how you respond, it's nearly impossible to break the cycle. Recognizing narcissistic behavior in your relationships is the first step in protecting yourself. Once you understand the signs, you can begin to take the necessary steps to protect your own mental and emotional well-being. This might involve setting boundaries, having difficult conversations, or in some cases, distancing yourself from the individual entirely. It's essential to remember that you do not owe anyone your energy, your time, or your emotional resources if they are not treating you with respect and kindness. In conclusion, narcissism is a complex and damaging trait that can have a profound effect on relationships. When you give a narcissist what they crave, constant validation, admiration, and attention, you only reinforce their toxic behavior and allow them to continue manipulating and controlling others. Understanding this dynamic and recognizing the signs of narcissism is the first step toward reclaiming your peace and protecting your emotional well-being. You have the power to stop feeding the narcissist and instead start focusing on yourself, setting healthy boundaries, and surrounding yourself with relationships that are based on mutual respect, care, and empathy. When you continuously give in to a narcissist's demands, you're not just giving them what they crave, you're empowering them to keep demanding more. Narcissists are driven by an insatiable need for validation and attention. And the more you feed this hunger, the stronger they become. It's a trap, one that many fall into unknowingly. You may think that by constantly meeting their needs, you're being kind, supportive, or even loving, but in reality, you're only feeding into their toxic behavior. This endless cycle becomes more destructive over time, leaving you feeling drained, frustrated, and unappreciated. Narcissists thrive on control. It's their currency. Every time you cater to their demands, they gain a sense of power. They learn that their manipulative tactics are effective, and they become more adept at getting what they want. The more you give them, the more they expect. At first, it might seem harmless, a compliment here, a favor there, small gestures that appear innocuous, but these small gestures quickly add up, and soon you find yourself doing things that aren't in your best interest, all to avoid their wrath or to maintain their fleeting affection. The danger in giving them what they crave is that it leads to a gradual erosion of your boundaries. Narcissists don't respect boundaries. They see them as obstacles that they need to overcome in order to maintain control. The more you give them, the more they'll push for even more. It's a never-ending cycle of demands, and each time you comply, you reinforce the idea that their desires are more important than your own. What begins as an occasional favor can transform into a constant stream of obligations that leave you feeling exhausted and resentful. One of the most insidious aspects of a narcissist's behavior is their ability to make you feel like you owe them something. They manipulate situations to create a sense of guilt or indebtedness. They might perform small favors or provide occasional praise, making you feel as though you're obligated to return the favor by giving them more of your time, attention, or energy. Over time, you may begin to believe that you need to keep giving in to avoid conflict or to maintain their approval. But this is a dangerous mindset that only perpetuates the cycle of narcissistic manipulation. What's even worse is that narcissists rarely reciprocate. They may offer superficial gestures of kindness or praise, but these are almost always self-serving. They use these actions to maintain control or to manipulate your emotions. In reality, they rarely have any genuine interest in your well-being. Their actions are focused on getting something in return, whether it's your admiration, your compliance, or simply your emotional energy. They want you to keep giving, but they don't have the capacity to give back in a meaningful way. This one-sided dynamic leads to emotional exhaustion as you find yourself constantly pouring into someone who never truly returns the favor. This pattern of giving and receiving is fundamentally imbalanced, and over time, it erodes your sense of self-worth. You begin to feel that your value is tied to your ability to satisfy their needs. You start questioning your own needs and desires, thinking that they are secondary to the narcissist. This self-neglect is damaging because it causes you to lose sight of who you are, what you want, and what you deserve. You may find yourself compromising on your values, goals, and well-being, all in the name of maintaining the narcissist's approval. But the truth is, no amount of giving will ever be enough to satisfy their unrelenting hunger. By continually feeding their ego, you inadvertently teach the narcissist that they can treat you however they want without consequences. They come to expect that you will always be there to fulfill their needs, no matter how unreasonable or self-centered those needs may be. They may use guilt, shame, or emotional manipulation to make you feel obligated to comply, and over time, you begin to lose your sense of agency. You become trapped in a cycle of compliance where your own needs are pushed aside in favor of theirs. The impact of this constant giving extends beyond just the immediate relationship. Over time, it can affect your overall mental and emotional health. You might begin to feel isolated as you prioritize the narcissist's needs over your own friendships and social connections. You may withdraw from others, feeling that no one else can understand your situation. Your self-esteem takes a hit as you start to believe that your worth is tied to how much you can do for the narcissist. And most importantly, you begin to lose sight of the importance of self-care and self-respect, two essential components of any healthy relationship. The cycle of giving and giving without receiving anything in return leads to a slow but steady erosion of your emotional resilience. It drains your energy, leaving you feeling depleted and worn out. It clouds your judgment, making it difficult to see how toxic the relationship has become. And it weakens your ability to stand up for yourself as you begin to doubt your right to assert your own needs and boundaries. Breaking free from this cycle requires a shift in mindset. It requires recognizing that your worth is not dependent on how much you can give to others, especially to someone who doesn't appreciate you. You need to stop seeing your role as a provider of constant validation and start seeing yourself as someone deserving of respect, care, and reciprocity. You must understand that it's not your job to fulfill the narcissist's every whim or desire. You are not responsible for making them feel good about themselves. The key to stopping the cycle is learning to set firm boundaries and protect your emotional well-being. It's about saying no when you need to and recognizing that your time, energy, and attention are precious. It's about realizing that you are not obligated to give someone what they crave if it comes at the expense of your own mental and emotional health. When you stop feeding the narcissist's ego, you begin to reclaim your sense of self and your power. You no longer allow their insatiable demands to dictate your actions. Instead, you prioritize your own well-being, and that's the first step toward breaking free from their grip. Protecting your boundaries is one of the most essential steps in maintaining your emotional and mental well-being, especially when dealing with a narcissist. Narcissists often thrive in environments where boundaries are weak or non-existent. They are skilled at pushing limits and testing your tolerance, always looking for ways to take more and more from you without ever giving anything in return. When you fail to set boundaries, you're essentially opening the door for them to manipulate, control, and drain you. This is where the importance of boundaries becomes evident. They act as the lines in the sand, the guardrails that prevent you from being swept away by their demands and manipulations. Many people struggle with setting boundaries, particularly when they are faced with someone who has narcissistic tendencies. The narcissist may respond with anger, guilt-tripping, or even charming tactics to convince you that your boundaries are unreasonable or unnecessary. They may attempt to make you feel like you're being selfish or cold-hearted for not constantly giving them what they want. However, it's crucial to understand that boundaries are not only for protecting yourself from others, they are a form of self-respect. Setting boundaries is an act of self-love, and without them, you allow others to dictate your emotional and mental state. One of the first steps in protecting your boundaries is recognizing that you have a right to set them. Too often, people feel guilty or insecure about enforcing boundaries, especially when dealing with someone who may have a powerful influence over them, such as a narcissist. You might feel pressured to go along with their demands because you don't want to deal with their wrath, or because you've been conditioned to put their needs above your own. But in reality, you have every right to protect your time, energy, and emotional well-being. Setting boundaries is not about being mean or rejecting others. It's about preserving your peace and not allowing anyone, no matter who they are, to walk all over you. It's also important to recognize that boundaries are not a one-time action. They are a continuous process. Once you begin to set boundaries with a narcissist, you'll quickly learn that they will test them again and again. Narcissists are persistent. They are used to getting their way, and they will push you to see how much they can get away with. That's why it's crucial to stay firm and consistent. Every time you waver or give in, you reinforce the idea that your boundaries can be broken or ignored. Consistency is key to ensuring that your boundaries are respected. There are several ways to enforce boundaries, and one of the most important aspects is learning to say no without guilt. Saying no is not a sign of selfishness or weakness. It's a declaration that you value your own needs and emotions. Narcissists may try to make you feel like you are being unreasonable for saying no, but the truth is you're simply protecting yourself from being taken advantage of. You do not owe anyone your time or energy if they are not treating you with the respect and consideration you deserve. Saying no firmly yet calmly sets a clear message that your boundaries are non-negotiable. Sometimes protecting your boundaries also means limiting your interactions with a narcissist. In many cases, you may realize that the best way to safeguard your peace is to distance yourself from the individual who consistently violates your boundaries. This could mean reducing the frequency of your contact, setting specific times for communication, or even cutting ties entirely if the relationship is too toxic. While this may seem like a difficult decision, especially if the narcissist is someone close to you, it's important to recognize that your mental and emotional health is more important than maintaining a relationship that continually drains you. It's also essential to understand that setting boundaries with a narcissist often requires clear, direct communication. You can't expect them to intuitively understand or respect your limits without explicitly stating what those limits are. This might feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to accommodating their needs, but it's necessary. Be direct and firm when explaining what you will and will not tolerate. If the narcissist tries to manipulate or guilt you into changing your mind, stand your ground. You don't need to apologize for having boundaries, and you certainly don't need to justify them. They are simply a necessary part of maintaining a healthy relationship with yourself and others. In some cases, the narcissist may try to gaslight you into questioning whether your boundaries are reasonable. They might tell you that you're being too sensitive or that you're overreacting. However, these tactics are just another form of manipulation. Recognize that their attempts to undermine your boundaries are a reflection of their own insecurity and need for control. Their lack of empathy and disregard for your feelings should not cause you to doubt yourself. If your boundaries are in place to protect your well-being, then they are both valid and necessary. Another crucial aspect of boundary setting is learning to recognize when it's time to walk away. Sometimes, despite your best efforts, a narcissist will refuse to respect your boundaries. They may persist in violating your limits, testing your patience, and draining your energy. In these situations, the best course of action is often to disengage. This can be incredibly difficult, especially if the narcissist is someone you care about or if there is a long history of emotional investment. However, walking away from a toxic relationship is one of the most powerful ways to protect your boundaries and reclaim your peace. Finally, it's important to remember that protecting your boundaries is a journey of self-empowerment. By standing firm in your convictions and refusing to allow others to infringe upon your space, you send a message to both yourself and the narcissist that you are worthy of respect and consideration. Your worth is not determined by how much you give to others, but by how much you value yourself. Protecting your boundaries is a declaration that you matter, that your feelings, needs, and well-being are just as important as anyone else's. By learning to set, enforce, and protect your boundaries, you create a foundation for healthier, more balanced relationships. You stop allowing others to drain your energy and start focusing on cultivating relationships that are built on mutual respect, trust, and understanding. Protecting your boundaries isn't just about keeping others out. It's about making space for yourself to thrive. When you protect your peace, you take back control of your life and reclaim the emotional and mental energy that you deserve. The power of self-worth is something that many people struggle to truly understand and embody, especially when they are in relationships with narcissistic individuals. Narcissists thrive on manipulation and control, often making those around them feel as though their value is tied to how much they can give or do for others. They feed off the validation they receive, but this validation is shallow and fleeting, leaving them constantly searching for more. In contrast, the foundation of self-worth is something far deeper. Something rooted in your understanding of who you are, what you stand for, and your intrinsic value as a human being. This is not something that comes from external validation or the approval of others. It is an internal belief that you are worthy of love, respect, and happiness just because you exist. When you rely on others, particularly narcissists, to define your worth, you set yourself up for constant disappointment. Narcissists are not capable of offering you the genuine love, appreciation, or respect that you deserve. Their validation is conditional, meaning it is only given when it serves their needs or when you fulfill their expectations. This leads to an unhealthy cycle where your self-esteem becomes linked to their approval, leaving you constantly seeking affirmation from someone who is never truly capable of providing it in a meaningful way. You may start to lose sight of who you are outside of the relationship and become consumed by their demands, believing that your worth is measured by how well you can meet their needs. In contrast, when you cultivate a sense of self-worth, you recognize that your value is inherent and not dependent on the approval or actions of others. This realization empowers you to stop seeking external validation and instead focus on the things that make you feel confident and fulfilled. Self-worth is a sense of deep inner knowing that you are enough as you are, without needing to prove yourself to anyone. It's about understanding that your unique qualities, experiences, and perspective have intrinsic value that no one can take away. Building and nurturing self-worth begins with setting boundaries that protect your emotional and mental well-being. When you value yourself, you are no longer willing to tolerate mistreatment or disrespect. You understand that you deserve to be treated with kindness, fairness, and consideration, and you refuse to allow anyone to diminish your sense of self. This is especially important when dealing with narcissists, who often try to erode your self-esteem through manipulation, belittling, or emotional abuse. By setting clear boundaries and standing firm in your convictions, you send a message that your self-worth is non-negotiable, and you will not allow anyone to trample on it. Another critical aspect of nurturing self-worth is learning to practice self-care. Taking time to prioritize your own needs and well-being is essential for maintaining a strong sense of self. Self-care is not just about physical well-being. It's about taking time to nourish your emotional and mental health. It's about engaging in activities that bring you joy, relaxation, and fulfillment, and recognizing that you are worthy of these experiences simply because you are alive. When you engage in self-care, you reinforce the belief that you are deserving of love, respect, and happiness, and you send a message to yourself and others that you take your own well-being seriously. Self-worth also involves letting go of the need to seek approval from others, especially from those who may not have your best interests at heart. Narcissists are particularly skilled at manipulating people into believing that their approval is essential for happiness or success. But when you cultivate self-worth, you release the need for external validation. You learn to trust your own judgment and make decisions based on what aligns with your values and goals, rather than trying to please someone else. This shift in mindset allows you to live more authentically and in alignment with your true self, rather than constantly seeking validation from people who are incapable of providing the support and appreciation you deserve. In many ways, building self-worth is a journey of unlearning the patterns of behavior that have been ingrained over time. If you have spent years allowing others to define your value, especially a narcissist who uses your need for validation against you, it can be difficult to break free from these patterns. However, it is possible to reclaim your sense of self-worth and build a strong foundation of inner confidence. This process requires self-reflection, self-compassion, and a commitment to honoring your own needs and feelings. It involves recognizing your strengths, celebrating your accomplishments, and accepting that you are worthy of love and respect simply because you exist. One of the most powerful ways to reinforce your self-worth is by surrounding yourself with people who recognize and appreciate you for who you truly are. Healthy relationships are based on mutual respect, care, and support, and these relationships provide a strong foundation for nurturing your sense of self. Being around people who value and respect you helps to remind you of your own worth and reinforces the belief that you deserve to be treated well. These positive relationships become a mirror, reflecting back to you the love and respect that you give to yourself, further strengthening your self-worth. Additionally, it's important to practice self-compassion and forgive yourself for past mistakes. Narcissists often use shame and guilt as tools to manipulate others, making them feel unworthy or inadequate. When you cultivate self-worth, you learn to let go of the negative self-talk that may have been planted in you by others. You recognize that mistakes are a natural part of life and growth, and that they do not define your worth as a person. Self-compassion involves being kind to yourself, understanding that you are worthy of love and acceptance even when you fall short of perfection. Ultimately, your self-worth is yours to define. It is not contingent on anyone else's approval or judgment. When you truly understand and embrace your own value, you are no longer susceptible to the manipulation of others. You recognize that your happiness, success, and fulfillment come from within, and you have the power to create a life that reflects your worth. This inner strength allows you to set and protect boundaries, let go of toxic relationships, and live a life that is aligned with your true self. When you embody your self-worth, you no longer seek validation from narcissists or anyone else who seeks to diminish you. Instead, you recognize that your worth is inherent and you are deserving of all the love, respect, and happiness that life has to offer. Understanding the importance of emotional detachment from a narcissist is crucial in breaking free from their manipulative grip. Narcissists thrive on creating emotional chaos, manipulating others into feeling a deep emotional connection or dependency, and using these emotions as a tool for control. They are expert at triggering intense emotional reactions, making you feel as though your entire world revolves around them. This emotional attachment can be incredibly difficult to break because it involves not only the bond you've formed with them, but also the emotional investments you've made over time. Emotional detachment, however, is the key to reclaiming your power, self-respect, and peace of mind. The first thing to recognize when dealing with a narcissist is that their goal is to create emotional dependency. They want you to rely on them for validation, affection, and self-worth. This dependency is not mutual, but one-sided. While you are emotionally invested, they are only interested in using your emotions for their own benefit, often with little regard for your needs or feelings. They know exactly what to say and do to pull on your heartstrings, to make you believe that you are their everything. However, this is simply a tactic they use to maintain control over you. Emotional detachment does not mean shutting off your feelings entirely or becoming cold and unfeeling. Instead, it involves recognizing that your emotions are your own and that they do not need to be influenced or dictated by the narcissist. It is about understanding that the emotional reactions the narcissist triggers in you are not genuine connections, but rather manipulative tools they use to maintain power. By detaching emotionally, you stop allowing their words and actions to affect your inner peace or sense of self-worth. The process of emotional detachment starts with acknowledging the unhealthy nature of the relationship. Narcissistic relationships are built on manipulation, deception, and one-sided emotional investment. While you may have genuine feelings for the narcissist, it's important to recognize that their emotions are not authentic or reciprocated in the same way. Narcissists may feign love or concern, but these emotions are typically tied to what they can extract from you, not a genuine desire for your well-being. Once you understand that the narcissist is not truly invested in you in a healthy, reciprocal way, it becomes easier to start detaching emotionally from them. One of the key steps in emotional detachment is shifting your focus from them to yourself. In a narcissistic relationship, your thoughts and emotions often revolve around the narcissist, their needs, their moods, and their demands. You might find yourself constantly trying to meet their expectations, fix their problems, or calm their outbursts. This constant preoccupation with their emotional state can drain you and make it harder to see the situation clearly. By focusing on your own emotions, needs, and well-being, you begin to reclaim your emotional independence. Take time to reflect on what makes you happy, what your goals are, and what you truly need from relationships. When you prioritize your own emotional health, it becomes easier to recognize when the narcissist is manipulating you or trying to pull you back into their emotional web. Another important aspect of emotional detachment is recognizing the patterns of behavior the narcissist uses to manipulate you. Narcissists often create emotional highs and lows, using tactics such as love bombing, guilt tripping, or gaslighting to control your emotions and keep you off balance. Love bombing is the process of showering you with excessive affection and praise in order to make you feel special, only to later withdraw that affection to make you crave it more. Guilt tripping involves making you feel responsible for their emotional state or convincing you that you owe them something. Gaslighting is when they make you question your reality or doubt your own feelings. Understanding these tactics allows you to see them for what they are: manipulative attempts to control your emotions, and helps you detach from their influence. Part of emotional detachment also involves setting emotional boundaries. Boundaries aren't just about physical space. They are also about protecting your emotional energy. A narcissist will often try to invade your emotional space, demanding your attention and emotional investment at all times. This can take the form of excessive texting, constant demands for validation, or emotional outbursts designed to make you feel responsible for their feelings. By setting boundaries around your emotions, you can create a buffer between yourself and the narcissist's manipulations. This might involve limiting your emotional responses to their behaviors, or refusing to engage in emotionally charged conversations that are designed to trigger you. Emotional boundaries allow you to protect your peace and avoid getting drawn into their toxic emotional dynamics. Detaching emotionally also means letting go of the hope that the narcissist will change. One of the most difficult aspects of dealing with a narcissist is the belief that if you love them enough or sacrifice enough, they will eventually recognize your worth and reciprocate your emotions. However, narcissists do not change unless they have a genuine desire to do so, and this is often not the case. They are not capable of forming deep, empathetic connections, and their behavior is unlikely to shift in a meaningful way. Accepting that the narcissist will not meet your emotional needs is a crucial step in detaching emotionally. This means acknowledging the reality of the situation rather than holding on to the fantasy of what the relationship could be. Letting go of this hope is often accompanied by feelings of grief, loss, and even anger. It's normal to feel sad or frustrated when you realize that the relationship isn't going to provide the emotional fulfillment you were hoping for. However, it's important to understand that these emotions are part of the healing process. By allowing yourself to grieve the loss of the idealized version of the relationship, you can begin to let go and move forward. Emotional detachment is not an overnight process. It takes time, self-compassion, and patience. But with each step you take toward detaching from the narcissist, you reclaim your emotional autonomy and begin to heal from the emotional wounds they've caused. Finally, emotional detachment is about creating space for healthier, more balanced relationships. When you detach from a narcissist, you create the emotional space needed for positive connections to flourish. You begin to recognize your own worth and emotional needs, and you attract people who respect your boundaries and offer genuine love and support. By emotionally detaching from the narcissist, you open the door to the possibility of relationships that are based on mutual respect, trust, and care, relationships that nourish your soul rather than depleting it. Emotional detachment is one of the most empowering steps you can take in breaking free from a narcissist's control. It allows you to reclaim your emotional health, set healthier boundaries, and focus on relationships that are truly fulfilling. While it may be a difficult and painful journey, it is ultimately a necessary one in order to protect your well-being and regain control of your life. In conclusion, the journey of breaking free from the emotional grip of a narcissist is not easy, but it is essential for reclaiming your sense of self, your peace, and your happiness. It begins with understanding the narcissist's manipulative tactics and recognizing that their validation is empty, their control is toxic, and their love is conditional. It requires you to set clear boundaries that protect your emotional well-being and to understand that you are worthy of respect and care, not based on what you can give to others, but because you are inherently valuable as you are. The power of emotional detachment cannot be underestimated. By learning to detach emotionally from the narcissist, you stop allowing their actions to dictate your feelings and regain the control over your life that you deserve. Most importantly, remember that your self-worth is not defined by the narcissist's actions or opinions. You are not their emotional punching bag, nor are you responsible for their happiness. Your happiness is yours to create. Protect your boundaries, honor your emotions, and take back control over your life. It may take time, but with every step you take towards healing, you are strengthening your emotional independence, paving the way for healthier, more fulfilling relationships, and building a future where you are free to be your true, authentic self. The strength you need to overcome a narcissist lies within you, and once you embrace your worth and detach emotionally, you will find the peace and freedom that you have long been searching for.